Shalom everyone, this is Aaron Lovaco speaking to you on behalf of Worldview Television and Radio, and I'm here at the ancient port maritime city of Caesarea, and I want to talk about Caesarea and Christianity and the connection. To begin with, I want to start off with the world at the time. We're talking about 2,000 years ago. We're talking about the period where the Romans took over this land. In 63 BC, Pompey declared this as part of the Roman Empire. And so they started to build places and they started to build cities. Here behind me are remains of some of the artifacts that we have found. A lot of relics, a lot of things. For example, here you have busts. You have here, actually this one is from a little boy holding a sheep on its shoulders there. Then you've got some people here, and of course the chopped off heads are a testimony usually of conquests. When people would come, they would chop the heads off. Probably this is when the Christians came in the 4th century, called the Byzantine period. These here were sculptures and statues of gods or people. Here is Bigfoot. And they used to what we call deify human beings. They would make them half men, half God, like a lot of the Greek mythological people like Zeus, Hercules, Charles Atlas, people like that. So especially during the Judeo-Christian periods and the world of the Judeo-Christians, they were against images and idols, so they would often smash them as a testimony of disapproval and conquest. Another part of the world here, especially the Greco-Roman world, are some of the structures that we've found here. And this is a massive, huge theater. And we're looking at some of the incredible building here. It's kind of an oval shape. And here you have the entrance and exits. These are called in Greek vomitarians. That's right, from the word vomit, to go out. The toilets also were called vomitarians. You have some secondary usage of stone here. Beautiful marble stone with decorative engravings there. The rest of the stone is, for the most part, sandstone. As we go out, and there in front of us is the Mediterranean Sea. That's the coast. And here we come into what's called a theater. Not an amphitheater. Amphi is a full circle. This is a theater holding up to about 3,000 people. Great acoustics. And for the most part, it has been reconstructed, but you do get some of the natural stones here, as well as some of the natural seating. You can see the difference between the old and the new, and the same down there. You've got natural and patched up stones as well. That was the stage. The theater was used mainly for entertainment, telling war stories, mythological Greek stories they would act out. This was all part of the Roman world at the time, because this was the center for the Roman soldiers. There was about 100,000 people living here 2,000 years ago. And of course, the name of the city is called Caesarea, named after the Caesar Augustus, or Octavian, which was one of his other names. So we're going to discover and explore more of the city, but it was here that Christianity really started to flourish, because we're at a crossroads here. You see behind me the Mediterranean Sea. That was what was called the ancient trade route called the Via Maris, which means the way of the sea. And that is the western border. So up in that direction is the north. So the sea right along that coast was the major trade route, along with the eastern one, which was called the King's Highway. And whoever controlled the trade routes really had a lot of power. And see, that's the main reason why King Herod built the city in the first place. He built a port, and that port controlled all of that Mediterranean Sea, from down in the south, from Egypt, right up into the north, to a place called Phoenicia, Tyre, Sidon, which is today's Lebanon. According to the famous historian Josephus Flavius, that port could hold up to 700 ships. 700, that's a mass amount of trade. Think of all the taxations and the levy that Herod could charge to every boat, every ship that would be coming through. So it was a great idea. And it was into this world, a very pagan, hedonistic world, that Christianity was born. It wasn't easy, because some of those idols and statues that you saw earlier bear witness to some of the beliefs that went on in the day. Some of the very focused on the material world, the body. And this was actually, this came from a lot of the Greek mythological figures like Narcissus, where we get narcissism from. The focus on the physical body. This is where they would participate in the gymnasium. You know, that word gymnasium comes from the word gymos, which means naked. The focus on the body. And the belief that if you looked within yourself, you actually are a god. And this was a very dangerous teaching. Of course, today we call that the New Age. So Christianity and Judaism fought against these issues. We're going to explore more as we move around this incredible site here at Caesarea Maritima on the Mediterranean coast, on the shores of Israel. Well, welcome back everyone to Caesarea Maritima here on the western border of Israel, the Mediterranean coast. As I'm walking down towards the port area, you can see some of the remains of a palace that King Herod the Great built in honor of Octavian, the Caesar of the day, Caesar Augustus. You can see some of the reconstructed pillars, the perimeters of a palace that was built here. But it was here that Christianity really began to flourish. We read in the New Testament about a lot of famous people that came here. There was Pontius Pilate, for example. In fact, just over here, we've found a stone that is dedicated, or rather has an inscription of Pontius Pilate on it. This is a replica of the original one that's found in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. There it is, and it has ancient Latin, and it talks about Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea. He erected a building dedicated to the emperor. So some exciting remains here. You've also got a prison over here, and it's believed that the Apostle Paul was here for a couple of years. You've got Philip the evangelist. It was here that it's mentions in the book of Acts that Philip had 4 daughters who prophesied, and he took the gospel out from Caesarea. That's where they sailed from. Here's the port that I was talking about that goes right down to that barge down there into the south. You can see, and it goes right along the coast here, and it goes right up to those rock formations in the north there. 700 ships. One of the key people that came to Caesarea was a man called Simon Peter. He had just had a vision about an hour's drive south in a port city called Jaffa. And he was told to arise and slay and eat these animals that he saw in a vision. And he understood that those unclean animals stood for the Gentile nations who were considered unclean by the Jewish people. So he comes here to Caesarea, and he meets with the Roman captain Cornelius, and he shares the gospel to Cornelius. And Cornelius is believed that he was the first Gentile believer. And it happened here in Caesarea. So Christianity began to spread. As I mentioned, Philip sailed off into the Mediterranean. Places like Malta, places like Greece, they all received the gospel from this place, Caesarea. But you know, it wasn't easy being a Christian at that period, and I'll tell you the main reason why. In that era, in that period, the Caesar, the Roman Caesar, he was considered to be like a god. He was, in a way, the equivalent of what Christians would call Lord. So when they called Jesus or Yeshua Lord, this was a direct affront on the authority of the Caesar, whoever the Caesar was at that time. And they were actually risking their very lives by calling Jesus Lord. So sadly to say, it was here in Caesarea that a lot of Christians faced their death. And in this place down here, you've got what's called a hippodrome. Now we're going to go down into that hippodrome, but actually where we're walking through here, this is believed to be the actual Praetorium area, the place where a man called Paul was brought. He was imprisoned. Like I mentioned over here, there's a prison where this group of people are standing. He was here for 2 years, but he was judged by one of the Roman leaders, a man called Felix. And, I'm sorry, not Felix, Festus. And this is where it says in the book of Acts, and we quote Paul, "For if I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof they accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal to Caesar." Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, "Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar thou shalt go." And that was from Acts chapter 25. So Paul was taken the next day where he appealed. He could have been a free man, but he chose rather to be arrested. so that he could testify before the Lord. But really, Paul got off pretty light compared to what you think of some of the other Christians. And we read about these stories in books like Fox's Book of Martyrs, which talk about the horrific injustices and suffering at the hands of the Romans. As we go down into the Hippodrome, you can see on the left here, everyone, a Roman toilet. I mentioned that the Greek word is vomitarian. There is where you would sit down. You've got underneath, you've got drainage. So this is a 2,000-year-old outside Roman toilet. Drainage, as I said, it goes right out into the sea. As we come into the Hippodrome was the place where they would race the horses, just like in the movie Ben-Hur. But what you've got in these places, you've got under the ground or under the seating, you've got places where the lions would come out, where they would feed on, or rather the Christians would be fed. You know, these poor Christians, you know, they had probably families, they had wives, they had children, they had their jobs, they had a good life maybe. And all they needed to do is, proclaim that Caesar is Lord, and they could go home. But instead they chose, as it mentions in the book of Hebrews chapter 11, they chose rather to suffer. Some were sawn in two. Some were killed by the sword. And it was in places like here in Caesarea that Christians suffered for their God and their Lord, Yeshua, Jesus. We'll pick this up more in just a minute. I'm standing here underneath a place called the Hippodrome here at Caesarea. The Hippodrome was a great place of entertainment, holding up to about 30,000 spectators, mostly soldiers. This Hippodrome was built for entertainment when the soldiers were away from their homes and from their family. As we go out to the Hippodrome, you can see the Mediterranean there, and you can imagine the cheering crowds. Here is the seating, the original, and you get some areas where they've been reconstructed, but they went all along there, and that side has been all destroyed along the western side, but you can see the seating all along here, the eastern side. And I came out of this place just here. This is where, can you imagine seeing lions being let loose to some of those Christians that were sent out in the middle here to be a sport, to be a part of the entertainment for the roaring crowds who really had in many ways low value of life back in those days, a very different perspective on the value of life. But Christianity in the 4th century began to flourish here. That's right. Caesarea became very well known and famous for a place of what we would call today apologetics, where people would study, and it became a place of great debate. You had, as I mentioned earlier, you're on the Mediterranean, and which was on the major trade route called the Way of the Sea, the Via Maris. So this was a crossroad for trade, a crossroad for history, a crossroad for religion, because you had the Jewish religion here who believed that they were God's chosen people. You had the pagan Roman world. They believed that people were chosen, and that if you looked within yourself and tapped into the gnosis, the knowledge that was in deep down within yourself, you would find out that you are a God. And then you had this new movement, religion called Christianity. And they believed that also they were part of God's chosen world and people. So it was here in the 4th century when Christianity began to flourish from a place in Turkey called Byzantine. That's where the Roman emperor at the time, Constantine, he wanted another seat of authority that would kind of parallel the West, which was Rome. He wanted one in the East. So he moved a seat of authority to a place in Turkey called, at the time, Byzantine. He changed the name to Constantinople, named after himself. That's today's Istanbul. So now we have a seat of authority in the West, Rome, and in the East, Byzantine or Constantinople. And from that period, for the next 4 centuries, Christianity began to flourish, and lots of pilgrims came to the Holy Land here, especially to places like where I am, Caesarea. And it was here that the first bishop of Caesarea, called Eusebius, he set up a place for study, for debate, for apologetics. He had a massive library here of at least 20,000 books, and many famous Christian leaders, Tertullian, Saint Jerome, many of these people that were called the church fathers, they came to Caesarea. They studied here. They began to debate. In fact, not too long ago, a few years ago, some of the archeological digging that goes along here still today, actually most of it is done in the sea over here in the Mediterranean Sea, and it's done under the water. Pretty much most of the archaeology above the ground is finished, but they send out scuba divers, and they found a coin, or rather, no, I'm sorry, it was a ring, but on the ring they had a coin. There's the Mediterranean there, which is on our our western border. If you go out directly out there, you'll get to places like Crete, Greece, Malta, Cyprus. There's the remains of the port under the ground there, some of the rocks. And they found a ring, and on the ring was a coin of the Good Shepherd. And it kind of bears witness to the fact that topics like the Good Shepherd were debated here at Caesarea. Good Shepherd is a very important messianic figure, because you've got shepherds like Abraham, you've got shepherds like Moses, and of course you've got shepherds like David. All those 3 men in the Bible were messianic figures. To Abraham was promised that through his seed all the nations would be blessed. And it was Caesarea where Jew and Gentile both had the revelation of who the Messiah was. Then you've got the shepherd Moses, and it was promised to Moses that there would rise up one like him in Deuteronomy chapter 18. And we know that in the same way Pharaoh tried to kill all the baby boys, but Moses was spared. The same with King Herod. The same Herod who built this city killed all the baby boys. And yet, just like Moses, Yeshua, Jesus, was spared. And then, of course, David, the shepherd David. It was promised that there shall never cease to be someone from the throne of David that would rule and reign. And of course, in the genealogies we see of Jesus, not only is Abraham mentioned, but he is called the son of David. So Caesarea has a long, rich history of Christianity. Peter, Paul, Philip, Cornelius, the first Gentile mentioned, where Jew and Gentile became one. And then you've got Eusebius and Tertullian and St. Jerome, all these church fathers, and some of the archeological remains here bearing witness, along with the New Testament accounts, the stories of what happened here. A great, incredible history that brought the light into the world, that went out from Caesarea to the nations, from along the coast here, from Caesarea Maritima. The year was 1095. The Pope at the time, Pope Urban II, is understanding that Islam has taken over many parts, especially of the European and Middle Eastern world. Here in Caesarea and in the land of Judea, which by now the land was called Palestina, because one of the Roman emperors changed the name from Judea to Palestina Secunda in the year 135, 137. The Muslims had taken over. You can actually see in the background a mosque even here at Caesarea, bearing witness, there's a minaret, bearing witness to the fact that Muslims had taken over, destroyed churches, and especially in Jerusalem, where they had destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the place believed where the Savior, Jesus, was crucified, buried, and risen. They had desecrated that place as well. So in 1095, Pope Urban II calls upon the first crusade. This was the mother of all crusades. There were 7 different crusades, but the first one was the largest. And so he calls on this crusade, and he gets Europeans from Italy, from France, from England, some of the Nordic countries. They come on that first crusade and they slaughter and take over everyone in the land, and then they set up a whole lot of churches, a whole lot of places. And the Crusaders, they were masters of the sea. They were very, very good fighting from the sea, whereas the Muslims, they were less expert. So the Crusaders built a whole lot of ports. They established and strengthened a lot of the ports. For example, over here, you've got a big special moat down here, and these walls go back about 1,000 years to that period. You notice how the wall, it's not a flat wall, it comes out, so that if you've got a battering ram, it takes the buffer, it takes the strength of the battering ram. So you've got a double protection there, and there are the walls from the Crusader period, going right down through this area here. The Crusaders came, and they also, especially in places like Jerusalem, Akko, they built a whole lot of areas. They built a whole lot of inns, places for hospitality that they called khans, Khans, or inns. They built hospitals. They built farms, markets, the markets in Jerusalem. And of course, they built a lot of churches along the way. And they were part of the history of Israel, and especially here in Caesarea. They established places of hospitality. They set up their own farms here, and they were walking in the footsteps of their predecessors, especially during the Byzantine period, the 4th to the 7th century. They believed that they were walking in the footsteps of Joshua. Joshua in the 12th, 13th centuries BC, he came into the land to drive out the inhabitants, the Canaanites, to purify the land. Well, in the same vein, they believe that they were called and risen up to do the same. Come in, drive out the evil that was here, and they believe, and that's where we get the word crusade from. They believe that they were on a crusade, just like Joshua, the son of Nun, and the Israelites were also on a crusade. So, you know, they walked in the footsteps of these great people and the mission that they were on. And they only lasted 200 years. It was only the 11th to the 13th centuries that they succeeded, because the Muslims in the 13th century, they came back. They were led by the great warrior Salah ad-Din in the 13th century. He came and he defeated the Catholic Crusades. So a lot of history here at Caesarea, a lot of blood being spilt, but a lot of books has been read and studied and debated. And of course, this crossroads of a place where the gospel went out, where we have so much remains. We have the Hippodrome down there. We have some of these caves, storage rooms. You can see the rocks, and the rocks still speak today because of the history behind these rocks. You've got even these baths from the Roman period with the beautiful marble built by King Herod the Great himself. And then you've got Muslim, Crusader period history, and you've still got archeological digging until today, mainly under the water, still finding relics, artifacts that bring to our remembrance some of the history and how Christianity, Caesarea was one of the key places that Christianity thrived and went out. And we're talking about 2,000 years. So maybe you'd like to come for a visit one day to this incredible site. It's one of the largest archaeological sites in the land. Right now it's quite pleasant because it's winter. It gets very hot and humid because we're right on the Mediterranean coast there. So shalom from Caesarea, Israel, from Aaron Levako on behalf of Worldview Television and Radio.
All right, guys, that's our broadcast for tonight. You appreciate the tour of Caesarea by our friend, our reporter, our tour guide, Aaron Levarco. Again, you make it all possible. We send him regular love offerings. For every one of these little videos, folks, we're sending him an honorarium and saying, thank you, Aaron, for taking your time and knowledge and experience and bringing us these ministry reports. You know, the Bible says that a workman is worthy of his hire. It would be very wrong and very selfish to ask him to do all this and not think about the fact that he has bills. He has a cost of living. That he's worthy of a wage as a workman. That he spends gas money getting there. Sometimes he has to go far from home and stay overnight at a hotel and film. And we need to cover this and then provide an honorarium to him. So again, if you appreciate all this, thank you for your support so we can keep it going. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Hey, would you also go to worldviewstore.com and get a bunch of these business cards? They are printed double-sided, these business cards are. They're printed double-sided, and they tell a little bit about Worldview Tube. So you can share these with family and friends, or maybe a waiter or waitress, or someone in the grocery store line, and say, hey, are you looking to understand the times? Here's a free 24/7 network that will help you to understand the times. Get those. They're free. The cards are a stack of 20, absolutely free, at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. Hey, don't forget, mark your calendar now for Friday night, October 23rd, Saturday, October 24th. It's our 23rd annual National Worldview Weekend. We've held our Worldview Weekends before in Milwaukee, but we've never held our national conference there. We've only held it at Lake of the Ozarks, Branson, and here in Memphis last year. This year, we're moving it to Milwaukee, the Waukesha Expo Center. And we're going to also do something we've never done in those 23 years. This year will be absolutely free. Yep, the building will cost us over $10,000 to rent for those 2 days, but we'll take a free will offering and raise the funds throughout the year. And this week, you should be able to start registering for it. It's free, but you're going to need to secure a seat. We were there in April for just one night, had over 1,000. We'll be announcing the entire lineup, bringing about 8 or 9 people with us to speak. You're going to love it. But mark your calendar now, would you? Friday night, October 23rd, Saturday, October 24th. Tell you more later this week. May God save America. Take care.